so years, and more aggressively the last for so years, and more aggressively. Well, the reason, and we're well into this discussion now. I did kind of want to get a quick synopsis from both you guys, and we kind of touched on it to some degree. But I'd like to kind of, because this is probably the biggest factor in me reeling and having a need to do something that enlightens people. So my question to Jeff is, and to Rome, is why do you think that Trump was able to be elected? And I'm going to put some provisos in here.
Mm-hmm.
Given what we know about him in terms of him not being willing to read and learn about his job, given the fact that he is clearly a pathological liar, I think we can all agree on that.
I agree.
Given that, if you believe in such a thing as morals, going into his first election, it was clear that he had none, if that exists, and he was fairly oblivious to any affairs of state understanding of that. Why do you think that he was the most popular Republican president and he got elected? I'll leave it at that.
To be honest with you, that's a question I've been trying to figure out myself too. But what I've kind of come to the conclusion is that people abandoned their conservative principles to change dramatically what came out of the Obama administration. Now, you guys like to say that it was a white lash, but people felt like their topics or their issues that were important to them were being taken away, and not because of race and not because of, but policy-wise, right? They were afraid of getting a Democratic justice in there, or a liberal justice, however you want to label them. The healthcare changes were so huge. They didn't believe that they didn't do their diligence to really look at how he managed the economy. I think they were
who managed the economy?
Obama.
So I don't understand what you mean by that.
I don't think so. You and I have had this discussion, and that things that he implemented there after taking the baton from Bush.
Yeah.
Really, really significant in keeping the economy from being absolutely smashed. And had they not taken those measures, in my opinion, anyways, although we had to take on debt and raise our deficit, it put so much liquidity into these businesses and into the American people's hands that it allowed the economy to limp along rather than to crash. And had he not had kind of the leadership and the drive to do those things, it could have been disastrous. However, because it was such a slow recovery, and although it did recover, I think there was angst amongst the American people. I think they were tired with politics in general. You saw that again in worldwide in other countries. There's angst with leadership and cronyism and kind of this political discourse, and they saw Trump as an outsider. And so they saw these handful of issues that became super important to them being championed by a guy that would otherwise make them puke.
Which issues?
So I think, this whole idea about make America great again, a lot of Americans were upset about their educational system and that we were driving down into the depths compared to other countries as far as our education. Our industrious and entrepreneurial spirit had been moved out over into other countries. Our taxation had been elevated. The feeling of government influence over your life, the over-regulation, these things that have really direct result in your personal life, policy-wise, but abandon, your quote-unquote morality to achieve those things. And so he became the person up there that was willing to say whatever they needed to say and be as bombastic as possible and be completely different than every politician they've ever seen. That's how I think he got elected the first time. Why he got so many votes in the second in 2020 is crazy. And I think it has to do with that divide that we talked about earlier, right? They just jumped into a camp, and their lack of desire to really learn the issues. But that's how I think he got elected the first time, is that the overwhelming arching feeling of government influence in your life, him being completely different, and trying to bring back their idea or concept of what America maybe was or really should be, right?
Ron?
Interesting what you say. When you mention cronyism, I'm assuming you mean you're talking about you were talking about the Obama administration, right?
I'm talking about all the administrations, talking about,
just politicians in general.
Politics as usual. Politics as usual.
Okay. All right. Because he was accused of that as he was doing the bailout when he came into office, and after George W. Bush. I mean, you're right. He had to spend a lot of money to get us out of that ditch. And one thing that people really criticized him heavily for was bailing out General Motors in Detroit. And a lot of people just thought that they should just let it die and let it go. But he was strongly and staunchly in favor of, this is an American institution. We let this die. What does that say about the symbolic shining example of the hill that America is supposed to stand for if we let this American institution just die? And so that was an example of cronyism, because, it's picking winners and losers. But he had to do it because of the rampant irresponsibility of his predecessor. And that tends to be the criticism from anybody or for anyone that comes after a lavish round of spending that tends to run the economy into the ditch. The person that cleans up and becomes the Betty Wright, the cleanup woman or cleanup man, then they always catch the heat for spending too much. And you can't win when you're dealing with, that kind of politic. I believe that Trump won because, before I tell you why, I don't think he got 74 million votes in 2020. That cheating rascal, we know he cheats. We know his voters voted twice. All the voter fraud that they found in the election were all in Republican districts for the most part. I do not believe he got 74 million votes. I do not believe that Joe Biden only beat him by 7 million. I think he smacked the crap out of him, and it wasn't even that close. And so the only reason why he won the first time was because we were humming along quite well. And I think, again, coronations are very difficult. Actually, I haven't said this before. Ascendancy is difficult. I mean, people already felt a certain way about the Clintons, and that was the person running against him. For some reason, and I know this sounds cliche, people had a really hard time, and I'm talking about so-called progressives, which is why they get on my nerves too. It's like you can't distinguish between an imperfect person and a mortal enemy like Donald. So Hillary is that bad? You can't tell the difference between those two? For real? You can't tell the difference between those two. Again, Hillary would not have picked Amy Coney Barrett. Hillary would not have instituted the Muslim ban. Hillary would not have advocated for separating families at the border. Now, yeah, you could talk about kids in cages in both administrations. Okay, fine. But we weren't separating families. Hillary Clinton wouldn't have done that. So people lose me when they don't take the time to do their own research and look for themselves. He won because people could not distinguish between Hillary and him, and they stayed home. That's how he got in. Now, if you follow the filmmaker Michael Moore's philosophy on that, yeah, he blames Obama for that too. Because when he went to Detroit to sip the water, and he fake sipped, according to them, and he didn't really help the people when their pipes were ruined, and that congressman allowed they switched the plumbing system, and so that the water coming in was poisoned, and all those communities got sick, and all those babies got sick and were catching hell because of that. And he went to do something about the problem, and they felt like he fake sipped. Oh, Flint, Michigan. It was Flint, not Detroit. It was Flint.
Yeah.
And so they said that they lost confidence in him because of that. But did they really? Because Hillary didn't even go to the Rust Belt. She didn't go there to try to fight for the vote. She just thought she had it in the bag. So he won because of that too. Hillary just sucked as a candidate, and she just thought that this ascendancy alone and her name alone was going to be enough to push her over the edge. And Donald had a lot of help too. And I'm not even talking about Russia interference. Freaking James Comey, that rhetorical knuckleheaded Boy Scout who couldn't keep his mouth shut. He didn't even let on that Donald was under investigation too, but he was quick to let out of the bag that Hillary Clinton was like days before the election. I mean, the race was already tight and she was cruising. I mean, she was up enough where there was beginning to be a little bit of separation between the two. But when that came out, he opened that investigation over nothing and didn't announce till years later that Donald was also under investigation too. That hurt her. So he had a lot of help. He had a lot of help, and a whole lot of people stayed home. And after all of this freaking pandemic, where he clearly demonstrated his incompetence and thought it was easy because the brother before him made it look easy, and he being incompetent and lazy and unwilling to do the research and the work necessary to understand the duties of the presidency, he didn't want to put in the work. He just wanted to say, I'm just better than the black guy. Okay? So he didn't even try. He made no effort. So that's why he sucked, and that's why he got his butt handed to him, rightfully so. But
wow. So tell us how you really feel, Ron.
Oh man, I'm not down with Donald. I'm not down with Donald.
I hear that, and I think I agree with you on as far as the re-election efforts. But I've said this to Steve in the past that Donald Trump's campaign, I thought, ran a smart campaign. They were really one of the ones to create such social media presence centralized in areas that were kind of on the fence, driving home issues that they felt important in those regions. And his internet campaign manager spoke volumes about how they did it and what their strategy was. And Steve doesn't ever want to say that their campaign ran a good campaign, but they must have in order to get a guy like that elected.
Well, don't misquote me.
People like watching train wrecks.
I said, don't misquote me.
Okay, all right. Well, in my opinion, that it was very wise for them, because you know how this social media stuff works, is that it gets in front of you, and it's in front of you on the daily, on the minute, on the hour. And they strategically found those areas, especially of the country, that could flip some of those swing states or to get those swing states to move in his direction, and did it very wisely, where Hillary had really no presence
Exactly.
And so I think that played a huge role too, is driving home those key messages that made them feel so important to these people that they were willing to abandon all the other things that they want to conserve, family values, morality, personal accountability, and all these things that that conservatives are supposed to conserve. They abandoned that, and I think part of it was because they felt like those hot topics were really on the chopping block had he not been elected.
But they were lies, though. I mean, that's what's so frustrating for me.
Well, that comes to my other point is that this republic, these people are no longer engaged in their civil and civic responsibilities.
So do we owe them the benefit of all this media coverage? Because I agree with you as far as his campaign. When I said he had a whole lot of help, MSNBC helped him, CNN helped him with hours and hours and hours and hours of free coverage to let him come on and spew that nonsense.
Absolutely.
Unchecked. Softball interviews, all
Well,
of
we
them.
know why. I mean, that sells.
Absolutely.
It sells.
Absolutely.
So, gentlemen, this is exactly why I started this channel, because I think that both of you guys touched on a lot of factors as to why he got elected, but I think you skimmed past the main reasons, and we talked about it a little earlier. Jeff, I mean, you talked about policy, politics, and emotions, and the border, and that stuff, and those are factors, and the campaign, right? I mean, the technological campaign that he ran. Well, the revolutionary technological campaign came 8 years before that with Obama, right? What they did was they did some standardized stuff that was good, but it wasn't revolutionary. It was what they needed to do. It was what technology allowed them to do. I think that we're still not choosing to admit the elephant in the room. And I find this on the right more than I do on the left, but we completely omitted race, right? My question was, in my brain, and trying to figure out why somebody like this would be elected. Why would a group of people so strongly gravitate towards a guy who clearly demonstrated a highest level of incompetence, right? First, and you're hiring somebody, you want somebody who at least appears competent, right? Clearly incompetent, couldn't answer questions in his debates. All he did was insult people. Secondly, we knew that this guy committed a racist positions in his businesses and got sanctioned by the Department of Justice for them in his past. We knew that when he got elected. We also knew that he didn't care about learning how to do his job. We also knew that he was as someone close to you, Jeff, actually said before the election, he was, what was the word he used? Morally bankrupt. That's what a great friend who lives in Montana said when we talked about Trump before the election.
Who is this friend? I don't know who it is. I'm just messing with you.
In addition to that, he had no political philosophy to speak of ever. He flip-flopped on abortion 5 times in one day before the election. He was Democrat, Republican, Democrat when it suited him. So he had no reason, nobody had any reason to believe that he would do any of the things that he would ever do or said he would do, right? Nobody had any reason to believe it because he was a pathological liar, which we all can agree. So in order to understand why an entire group of people would vote for someone like this, to me, it had to be more deep. And what I came up with was, unfortunately, this false notion of race that we have been brainwashed to believe in, right? I think, as you so eloquently put it, I think that it was largely due to fear of the changing demography of the nation. And that's what he spoke to more than anything. And he did nothing but make those problems that he had when he got elected more obvious during his entire 4 years, right? Still never read his briefings. Never read his briefings. How can you hire a pilot to fly a plane if he's not going to learn how to fly the plane? And he admits it, right? That should be the first qualification for somebody doing a job. Are you going to be competent? No, he chose not to be competent. Did he have conservative principles? No. Did he have? Now he did do some stuff with the Supreme Court, which like Rome said, any conservative would have done the same thing. Anyone. Why this guy? Okay. So and then there's the regulations. That is one thing that I felt people were secure about, that he would do something about removing regulations because they felt he's a businessman. That's what he wanted to do. So to me, that's the one thing that you kind of could count on. So why would he be the most popular Republican president ever? And it has nothing to do with politics at all. It has everything to do with fear of a changing planet with respect to power and demographics. And Rome, on your side, I think you kind of missed the boat. You talked about a lot of things that were factors, Hillary and the press helping him out, and some other things that were factors, but none of them would have moved the needle enough to vote for somebody who had all those negatives, in my opinion. So I'll leave it at that.
Well, that's because I'm driving the boat. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything you just said because we had covered it earlier. I didn't go into it just in my last rhetorical flourish, but I agree with everything you just said. I'll turn it over to Jeff.
Well, as a white dude that has like probably Heinz 57 lineage, I've never felt that in my circle of people. Now, it might just be the people that I engage in that are that are multi-ethnic or white or whatever, feeling that it's a race issue. And so from a white guy perspective, quote unquote white guy, right? It's difficult to hear that the reason why you must have voted for this guy is because you fear this changing or this browning of America.
What do you think about that? Do you disagree with it? Do you think that it's probable?
Certainly, I think that is a factor, right? For some people, but overwhelmingly, this country voted for a black president. Overwhelmingly, this country is putting in more and more people of different ethnic and cultural backgrounds into Congress, into Senate, into their local leaderships.
And they voted for that black president. And when
twice,
his positions. Now, here's the deal. There's a couple of things I want to say about that. That particular person, whether you want to admit it or not, is a special individual, right? Whether outside of politics, I don't want to mention.
Oh, absolutely.
He's a special guy, right? So this guy had to be number one.
He had to be perfect.
He had to be perfect. Number one. Number two, he pretty much was perfect. How does a guy go through 8 years and have no scandals whatsoever?
Listen.
No, hold on. Let me finish.
Okay.
The second thing is, his policies were fairly similar to Clinton. Why did Clinton not leave office with the same level of vitriol? They're Democrats. They both revived our economics. Well, theoretically revived it. I mean, I think Clinton benefited from the .com bubble, but they both did it. They both turned around our economy. Why did Clinton never have the level of vitriol, although he had thousands? I mean, he's done stuff in Arkansas that are worse than maybe some of the stuff Trump or most of the stuff Trump did. Why did he never have the level of vitriol when he left office that Obama did?
See, I don't know. I think that he did have a level of vitriol, and I think the time of him leaving versus the time now. I mean, we're in a totally different information.
I didn't see the Tea Party form after Clinton left.
No, but you saw George Bush get elected. You saw George Bush get elected.
Yeah, but that has nothing to do with George Bush. That had everything to do with his dad, right? It wasn't. But where was the vitriol? My question is, where is the vitriol?
Listen,
I mean, the dude was impeached, right? He was impeached.
Yes, he was.
Had no blemishes.
I do think, quote unquote, the conservatives or the voting base on the right hate the Clintons and continue to hate them to this day. Even though Clinton, in his last 2-3 years of presidency, switched to the middle of the road on his policy.
Do you think Trump gets elected after Bill Clinton?
No, it's a different time.
Exactly my point. It would have been if I think if Obama got elected and did the same things during Clinton, the same thing would have happened, in my opinion. And it was a different time, but it was more likely to happen anyway because he probably couldn't have gotten elected at that time.
Well, you just said he was a special person.
He was a special, exactly. So why did he leave office?
Here's the thing,
and get treated the way he got treated.
Here's my question: if he was in the same time frame after George Bush Sr., when we elected Clinton,
yeah.
If you insert Obama,
yes,
then Obama being Obama,
yeah,
you don't think he gets elected?
No.
Okay. Why?
I think that we still weren't ready with respect to this false notion of race, right? I think that Obama probably wouldn't have been able to happen with the stuff that he had to go through as a kid. I don't think Obama would have been able to happen during that time. I think that things would have been more restrictive. It probably would have been harder for him to get to places that he got to at that time.
No, that's not what I'm asking. That's not what I'm asking. I'm saying, you take the man, Obama, and you put him after George Bush Sr.
Yeah, I don't think he gets elected. I think we're still at that point not ready to elect a darker skinned person.
Okay. What do you think, Rome?
After 2 terms of George W. Bush, the country was ready for change. And I don't necessarily think they were ready for that change in the 90s during Clinton. Not to the same degree. So getting him elected in the 90s, far more difficult, even less likely than when it actually happened in 08.
So my question would be, if the country wanted to change, and we were at that point in American history where that change was to elect a black man, why then is it such a crazy change after 2 terms that it's a race primary issue that we elect Trump?
Because people have told me that they felt like Obama was for others.
Those are individual conversations that you have, and I see how that shapes your opinion. But I'm talking about the entire country. The entire country was ready for that change. That entire country was ready for that in American history. And then what you're saying is all those people that you're saying then had a change at heart.
Well,
no, I feel like no, I'm not saying that all those people. I mean, you're putting everybody into the same basket. What I'm saying is that you combine
you put everybody in the same basket by saying it was. You put everybody in the same basket by saying it was race, and all those other factors were.
No. That's what I'm saying. Yes, that race. But remember, we had two presidents with relatively similar philosophies politically, relatively similar charismatic abilities, right? One guy who had no scandals, the other guy who had a tremendous amount of scandals. One guy left office with more vitriol. I mean, I never saw anybody in Congress yell out to Clinton that he was lying. He got treated worse than any president I've ever seen before and since. Well, Trump, but we'll talk about that another time. But he got treated worse than any president I had ever seen before that. Would you agree with that? So the question is why? And this guy, he carried himself in a way that in my opinion, would have made no matter who it is, all Americans proud. Now, I did not see this. People were telling me this. I didn't buy it while it was happening. I didn't see the race issues while they were fomenting, in my opinion. But in retrospect, looking at how something could go in this direction. Now, Trump getting elected is more complicated than just race. But my position is that yes, America was able to elect him, but for the fact that he was particularly special, he looked a particular way, he spoke a particular way. Because if it was Jesse Jackson, guess what? He didn't get elected, and he was the guy. So, yes, I do think the major issue, unfortunately, and this is what has kind of thrown me for a loop for the last 5-6 years, I do think that race the largest factor now, and I'm fairly sad about it. And with Trump and what he has done, the fact that he continued to drum up the radical right racist base, and that was okay with everyone, also just added to my belief that
But when you say
America does want to be great again, which means back at a time. And if you ask people when they wanted to be great again, some people say the 1900s, some people say the 1950s. Nobody says the 2000s when Obama was elected, but they always talk about great again. So there's a lot of factors, and we don't have enough time to go into them, that shaped my opinion. But unfortunately, I think that now I say this to say this. It's okay for them to be concerned about that, right? Because I think if the shoe were on the other foot, black people would be concerned about the same thing, or so-called black people. So I'm not mad about it. I would just rather people admit that that is the thing so that we can move forward and be a better country. I'm sorry, I was a little long-winded.
For them to do that, though, they would have to take their own inventory and acknowledge some realities and some really inconvenient truths that they are wanting to not acknowledge around the issue of race. And remember, the Clinton dynasty has very, very long coattails. So, Jeff, you asked, how did Barack Obama get elected? Well, who was he running against? Here we go again, another Clinton. And it just gives you the idea of how much absolute disdain the electorate has for Hillary Clinton. She ran not once, but twice and lost both times. Okay. And the first time she couldn't even get out of the primary because people didn't like the fact that she was associated with her husband, who she never left. And they were ready for change. So again, coronations are very difficult. Ascendancy is very difficult, meaning that, okay, it should be her turn now because she's next in line. And so she deserves it. She's been there. She's earned it. And at that point, I don't even think she was Secretary of State yet. I think she was Obama's Secretary of State. So she had done some things around the CHIP program even prior to that. So she had a political pedigree of her own, but people did not like her. And so that's why, another reason why Obama was considered a more attractive alternative, especially when they saw him win Iowa. Because trust me, black folks weren't ready to vote for him either until they saw him win Iowa, which was, of course, considered to be they're always first in the nation in terms of primaries. Okay, so it's considered like middle America, conservative, and so if you can win there, that's a template for the rest of the country. So when black folks saw him win there, okay, black voters are very strategic. All voters, white voters, are very strategic. They're like, who can win? Who can win? I mean, they can vote against a black person if the white candidate is better, advocating for the interests of the country as a whole. So race is definitely a pervasive factor, but people are very strategic, and people are going to have to be that and continue to be savvy with their vote, strategic with their vote, in order to make sure that they protect this democracy and never again allow themselves to develop such voter apathy and disdain for this process as if it doesn't impact them. Because we see what happens when we allow that to fester and settle in, that no matter who you vote for, it doesn't matter. It always matters. So you got to vote in every local election. You got to vote in midterms. Every time there's an election, you got to vote, because Republican legislators are in control of this country. There's like 50 of them, and Republicans are in control of at least 30 of them. So that's because people don't stay engaged, and they wonder why all these judges are put into place at these circuit levels, because they're not voting and they're not aware that these elections have consequences. It matters. And so Barack Obama, lots of reasons why he got in. I agree with Steve that there was a race component to it, but I also believe that, okay, now I don't want to minimize that. That's huge, and that is the elephant in the room. I do agree with that. That is the elephant in the room. But I'm also just adding the added emphasis that the utter disdain that people have for Hillary Clinton was a big factor in that as well, as to why he was picked in the first place.
Well, and that brings me to my point, is that I'm not devaluing the idea of how race played in our elections and our elections in general. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is that if the American population had a
But to be fair, as one of your issues why he got elected, you didn't mention race at all.
Well, because we had already talking over about race being involved in everything that we're talking about.
Oh, okay.
But I would say that, yes, I'm not trying to. That's why I want to be very clear that I do believe that it played a factor in all of our elections, right? And I think people generally, will join the team that they look like. I mean, unfortunately, that's kind of how things kind of go in the essence of things. But if America had a huge disdain for the Clintons and voted for Obama for a change,
mm-hmm.
and like you said, Steve, that it was politics as usual when Obama was there, that disdain then carries over. And to then say, well, no, the reason why he didn't,
what disdain? What do you mean?
He gets elected twice, as far as disdain for policies and cronyism, and this perceived effect that the president has on their individual life.
Uh-huh.
Right? So if it was politics as usual, just like the Clintons, and Obama didn't really do anything,
and the Bushes.
Yeah. And then you throw in this bombastic, crazy candidate that's different than everybody, that's willing to say things that nobody's willing to say up there. Talking about how all these politicians take these quote unquote bribes, and he's one of the ones that did it. Things like that changed the narrative in politics as usual, and I think that it became a refreshing kind of performance that he put on, even though even though a lot of that crap was lies, but they weren't willing to do the research about those lies. All they know is they hate politics. They hate politics as usual. They hated the way Obama did a politics as usual. Even some minority groups hated the fact that Obama did politics as usual and didn't help as much as he could have. And so then you have this disdain that carries over of politics and this junk that carries over with, where all the money goes, and the individual feels like they're being still left out. Shuttle in Donald Trump, social media, information highway, and he gets elected.
I remember they
re-elected. And so then when as a guy that's of lighter complexion, to then say, hey, well, race is the factor. It is the factor. It's somewhat offensive because that is not a factor with myself at all. And I'm assuming that there are millions of people out there like me that it's not about race. It was about the policies. It was about the presidency, and it was about not necessarily. I didn't vote for him, but is like me saying this crap is ridiculous. And then they go, well, Trump's even more ridiculous, and they throw him out of office. How then is that race?
Half the country voted for the guy. After
half the country didn't.
Yeah. So
you think
after you show who you are, right? And I really didn't want to get into this because this can take us down another rabbit hole. But after you show who you are, right? You tell the white supremacists that you're with them, right? You lie to the American public every single day, 15 times a day, or whatever it was. You still tell the people that you don't want to read your briefings and know what you're doing, and your policies show it because everything you rolled out was crappy. Not the policy itself, but how it was rolled out. It was a morass of incompetence. Everything he rolled out, even the stuff that people thought was successful, was rolled out in a way that a 12-year-old could have done. So even after you but the worst of those is you have chosen not only to break laws in public, in full view of the public, even though I know what you're going to say, people don't pay attention to that because they're partisan, right? And they weren't watching it. But that's the main reason I made this podcast, because I think people have decided to be willfully ignorant, and that's going to be the downfall of American democracy.
And that's where I wanted to stop you right there, is because I all of those factors that you had said, those are all things that you learned from you paying attention and listening to multiple sources and reading multiple things and coming up with, here's the truth that you've identified. 99% of the country, that's just a stat, right? I'm just throwing that out there, but 99% of the country
that's what we are.
CNN or Newsmax, and what they're hearing is, oh, he didn't really mean that when he said the racist stuff. That's not, they spun it the wrong way. The media is lying to you. This is what he meant. And so you get this, again, this confirmation bias that the other side is lying and Trump is telling the truth. And the only way that you can discern that is by figuring it out for yourself, which most people don't. But then being told that you're racist because you're throwing that guy in there when you believe that he wasn't, because you haven't done your diligence to figure it out for yourself. Right. And so for someone like me, it becomes slightly offensive. Now, if you're saying all of those other people are racist, then that's cool, because I don't know who they are.
For so years, and more aggressively the last. Well, the reason